Welcome, everyone. My name is Brandon Silver, and I'm an international human rights lawyer and director of policy at the Raoul Wallenberg Centre for Human Rights based in Montreal. We were founded by Professor Irwin Cotler, the former Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada and longtime parliamentarian, who regrets he could not be with us here today due to health reasons, but who has been serving as international legal counsel to the families of missing and murdered in the terrorist atrocities perpetrated by Hamas on October 7th. Les atrocités terroristes perpétrées par Hamas a massacré en plus que 1200 personnes. Il a pris plus de 250 otages. En particulier, des femmes étaient ciblées pour ces atroces dans une manière violente avec des viols en masse, avec de violences sexuelles graves. And make no mistake about it, these crimes, the murder and maiming over 1,200 people, the taking of over 250 hostages, 134 of which remain in captivity and continue to suffer as we speak. Make no mistake, that is motivated by anti-Semitism. Not because I say so, but because the perpetrators say so. Hamas, in their charter, has called for the murder and maiming of every Jew wherever they may be found, including here in Canada, and the destruction of the State of Israel. And they've announced that in their charter, and they've repeated it and said that we will continue October 7th over and over and over again until we carry out our genocidal mission. That is the message of Hamas and what their goals are. So over 40 different nationalities were affected, despite it being anchored in genocidal anti-Semitism, these terrorist massacres. It envelops all of humanity. It affects all of us, wherever we may be. Over 40 nationalities were affected, including many Canadians. So we are here today with the family members of missing and murdered Canadian women who were targeted in the October 7th attacks. They've come to Ottawa to share the stories of their loved ones. They are aunts, mothers, grandmothers, daughters, coming with a cri de coeur, calling out for justice, calling for action from the Canadian government. And again, as you hear the stories that they're here to share, the pain that they're suffering, it's important to recall that this is still happening. These are not crimes that occurred. They're crimes that are occurring now as we speak. And those that were targeted, they were peace activists, humanitarians, the very best of humanity, experiencing the very worst of inhumanity. They need our help. They need Canada's help. And, you know, Hamas is taking not only Israelis hostage, not only peace activists hostage, but they're holding Palestinians hostage. Therefore, Hamas and Iran, which arms, trains, funds them, are the greatest enemy to peace, to Israelis, to Palestinians, and to our common humanity. Hamas is a threat to us all and to the shared values that we hold dear. So I want to first call Jackie Rivers Vital to the podium. She's from Ottawa, the mother of Adi Vital Kaploun, who was murdered in the attacks, and the grandmother of Negev and Eshel, two infants who had been taken hostage by Hamas and later released. And for those of you who live here in Ottawa, you may also know their small family business in the Byward Market, their local family that were affected in these attacks. Jackie.
Good morning. My name is Jackie Rivers Vital. I was born in Ottawa and lived here for 18 years. Moved to Toronto, went to the University of Toronto, and when I finished my studies, I moved to Israel. I am the mother of 4 children, the grandmother of 8. I live in Jerusalem. On October 7th, 2023, I happened to be in Ottawa visiting my family when the Hamas terrorists broke into Israel, into the Gaza envelope. They entered Kibbutz Cholit, one amongst many kibbutzim, and my daughter was hiding in the safe room with her two small boys, Negev, who was 3.5, Eshel, who was 6 months old. She had a rifle in that room because her husband was part of the security squad of the kibbutz. He was out on a picnic, so he wasn't at home. She called him. She asked him, I hear the terrorists. What do I do? There was a shootout, and we know that because the dead body was found in the house after her son, Negev, the 3.5-year-old, has told us many times that the terrorists tried to drill the baby, and his mother drilled back. Adi was murdered in that room in front of the eyes of those two small boys. There is footage of them the boys being taken out of the house. Negev had shrapnel injury to his foot. On the footage, you see the terrorists trying to bandage his foot, carrying the baby out of the house. And between that time and maybe half an hour later, they brought the boys to one of Adi's neighbors, told her to come with them, and they marched them to Gaza. The neighbor was carrying the baby. The terrorists had Negev on their shoulders because of his, he couldn't walk. They did cross over the border. They were in Rafiach. They were almost at a tunnel. There were cameramen there. So there's footage of that too. And at some point they put Negev down on the border, and there's a film of a woman in blue coming to pick him up. And they claimed that it was the mother, but it wasn't. It was the neighbor. They murdered their mother. These two little boys were hostages in Gaza, but they were released. They walked back to the kibbutz. Took them many hours under gunfire, under fires burning. They're safe. My daughter's husband is safe. My husband was on the kibbutz that day. He's safe because they didn't enter his home. I have another daughter who lives on a kibbutz in the Gaza envelope. They were also in their safe room for 12 hours. We had no communication with them for almost 24 hours. They too are safe. 9 of 10 family members were saved, but that doesn't help. Adi was murdered.
Thank you, Jackie, for sharing with great courage, for being here in Ottawa, and for sharing what happened to Adi and to your grandchildren, Negev and Eshel, and to the kibbutz and to your family. I'll now call on Irene Nurit Cohen, who is a volunteer with the Zaka Humanitarian First Responders Organization. They were the first at the scene of the crimes of October 7th, assisting with burials, eyewitnesses to the mass atrocities and the targeted sexual and gender-based violence against women, which are currently being perpetrated against the hostages.
Thank you, Brendan. My name is Irene Norit Cohen. I was born in Copenhagen, Denmark. My family came to Israel just 2 months before the Yom Kippur War in 1973. At that time, we were sitting in a shelter room. When I was 18, I was recruited to the IDF. The first Lebanon war broke out. A lot of my friends were killed. We were, again, in shelter rooms. And now my daughter, she's a combat soldier in the IDF. Her base is Zikim, which was invaded that day. Many of her friends were killed. She was fighting off that evening the terrorists. She has also been to Gaza fighting. We're all very proud of her. I'm a volunteer of Zaka, the Zaka organization, which is an ultra-Orthodox organization, all volunteers. We're a humanitarian international organization recognized by the UN. We are always on scenes whenever there are casualties that have been killed in a non-natural cause, which means earthquakes, building collapsing, floods, car crashes, and of course now also a terror attack. Being on the scene, my fellow volunteer friends from Zaka, I was not allowed the first few days because it was a closed military area at first, but my commander and the other commanders were there the 7th of October, not knowing exactly what was going on and not understanding the scene. We did not have enough information at first. They came already that evening, the 7th of October. They were at the Nova Festival area, could not even reach the area because the road was full of dead bodies. Cars that were shot at, burned, bodies were burned. And then when they finally got to the area of the festival of Nova, horrific scenes. Horrific scenes. I have on my telephone a presentation of my commander, Chaim Otmazgin, and other of his friends, his personal pictures that he took that day and the days after in the kibbutzes, because we were not allowed. We respect the dead. We know the families. We respect the families. We are not allowed as volunteers. I'm not allowed to take pictures. But he, as the commander, he has been taking some pictures. Especially, I have the pictures of women and men of sexual abuse and violation. And I have been showing these pictures now for the last few days. I think it's important. We bear witness. We were there. We saw what the Hamas terrorists did and their followers. We have seen the bodies. We have seen the mutilation. We have seen the massacre. We have seen how they tortured people alive. And you can tell from our experience, you can tell that they were still alive while they were raped, cut off limbs, poked out eyes, burned them alive at the area of the genitals. Horrific scenes. They went through hell before they finally were shot in their heads or hammered in their heads. These are the scenes that I have to live with because I've seen it, but I feel that this is my mission to come and tell you this was what happened. The smell, I still have the smell in my head. I still see the scenes, and this is something I have to live with every day of my life. Sad, sad scenes of families tied together, burned, babies in cribs. I have to say that as we also treated the bodies of the Israelis and the Jews, we, of course, as humanitarian organization, we also backed the Palestinian terrorist bodies. This is what we do. We treat each and every one equally. I, myself, mostly took care of terrorist bodies when I came in. Also soldiers, also on the kibbutz, and also on one of the army bases. That's what I did. It's not just me. We are many witnesses of what happened that day. And we speak out for those who cannot speak. And I show pictures that nobody has seen before to show the world the atrocity and the massacre that happened that day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Irene, for sharing your eyewitness accounts of the widespread and systematic crimes against humanity perpetrated against innocent people, the grave sexual and gender-based crimes, and the important humanitarian work that your organization undertakes in the spirit, humanitarian spirit of the Israeli people, treating all bodies with dignity, and now sharing that so that all of you here can bear witness. I will next ask Galit Lapidot, originally from Regina, Saskatchewan, the aunt of Tiferet Lapidot. May her memory be for a blessing to please take.
My name is Galit Lapidot, third generation Canada. I'm very proud to be a Canadian. My niece, Tiferet Lapidot, Tiffy, was born 23 years ago. I was there when she was born. She was my sunshine. I loved her like a daughter. I was there every step of the way. She was a big sunshine. She had a great smile. Look at her smile. Wherever she went, people want to hear about her, to hear her. She was so curious and nice and good heart. She had a wisdom that an old lady. And when she was 20 years old, she wanted to go and travel. And she traveled. But before, she went to a delegation in South Africa to help children with special needs. And she didn't ask if the kids were Christian or Muslims or Buddhism. It doesn't matter. We have the same values like in Canada. Same one, same thing. And she continued to travel, people around her. She was glad and happy. For 1 year and 7 months, we missed her so much. And then she came for just 3 weeks. And she loved Australia. She wanted to go back to Australia. But she came for 3 weeks, and it was wonderful. We hugged her and kissed her. And we saw a grown woman there. So wise. So quiet. And people wanted to see her. And she had 1.5 hours to each and one of them. And then the Black Sabbath came. And something happened, not just to us, to the world. Rules were broken there. Tiferet had to go up with a car with her friends, but she stopped the driver and said, I'm going now to the other friend, my other friend Rini. She's by herself in the car. She stopped the driver in the car. She went up and joined Rini. The group of the people were saved. But that's Tiferet. We weren't surprised. Then she called her mother about 9 o'clock. And she asked her mother, and she said to her mother that something's wrong. And the mother can hear shots. And she thought maybe it's something small. But Tiferet said something serious is going on. Not my brother and not my sister-in-law thought. Something so big. Tiferet asked her mother, what should I do? I'm running. I'm hiding behind the bushes. What should I do? Do I go to the people behind the bar with them or to continue to hide? I'm just thinking about the horror of the mother that in the phone. And then since then we didn't hear about Tiferet for 9 days and 9 nights. stories were pouring inside. The films of the Hamas that they took, that they publicized, what they're doing to women, not just to women, but the condition, the atrocities. We couldn't sleep. We couldn't eat. I couldn't go into a nice bed. I was all the time imagining that she's calling me, that she's calling her mother. How can we sit here and know that she's in hell, there in hell? It's something that we're not used to as human beings in a democrat. In this world, it's like we can't understand. After 9 days, we, unfortunately, Tiferet's body was recognized. And she's not here anymore. She's not here. She was murdered. She was murdered. And when the mother wanted to see her before the barrier, the mother wanted to see her face, Tiferet's face for the last time. So the manager said to her, "I don't think it's a good idea." And then when they rolled her in before she was buried, we couldn't help it. And I ran to the body. And you don't do things like that. You don't run and don't touch the body. But I couldn't help it. And I ran there and I hugged her. The smell was unbelievable. Smell from hell. And I knew her body so good. And she didn't have a leg. I wonder why. Peace fighters, huh? She didn't have a leg. I wonder why. So we have to cope day after day. Our families, her mother, her father, her brothers, we have to push their thoughts, the bad thoughts, every day. What did she see? What did she smell? What did she feel for those? She was in hell, living hell. But the legacy is we're going to continue. We are going to continue to dance. And we're here. It's war, light versus dark for everybody here in this world. Thank you.
Thank you, Galit, for being here and for sharing part of Tiferet's joy and kindness and generosity of spirit, a sense of who she was with those in the room, and also how that light was snuffed out by the worst imaginable atrocities. Thank you for your resilience and for continuing to be here and to bring that light into the world. I'll ask Iris Weinstein-Huggy to come to the podium now, also a Canadian family, and whose mother and father, Judy and Gad, were murdered and whose bodies are still being held hostage. Her mother is from Toronto, and the last Canadian hostage being held. Iris.
Hi, my name is Iris. My mother is Judy Weinstein. My dad is Gad Khagi. My mom is the only Canadian hostage currently in Gaza. My mom and dad were an inspiration, not just to me. Every day I get thousands of remarks, messages, how my mom impacted their lives, my dad, My mom was a English teacher for many years. She fought to get the mindfulness into the education system in her school because of the anxieties in the Gaza Strip. And that Saturday, I currently live in Singapore. My mom and dad, who live on Kibbutz Nir Oz, where 1 out of 4 is either held hostage or murdered, they went on their beautiful Saturday walk together outside in the fields, just like any day. And I noticed that there are many red alerts that day, which unfortunately is nothing unusual. We have been bombed for 20 years already. Bombs in that area is a weekly thing, but we have safe rooms, thankfully, and iron domes because we value life. And I asked my parents that morning, what's going on? You okay? I was being a little cynical because, unfortunately, it's irregular. And they said that no, there are hundreds of rockets over their heads. And in the meantime, I spoke to my friends in the kibbutz. I know everybody, every single one of them is part of my DNA. And they were telling me that there are 2 terrorists inside the kibbutz dressed as IDF soldiers. And I noticed that my parents didn't talk to me. They didn't let me know if they're home or not. I tried to call, nobody answered. And that's basically how my day ended. I lost touch with my friends. The last thing I knew, the terrorists were going door to door, killed their children, burning their children, massacring my hometown. Almost 50%, if not more, of the houses are completely burnt. My whole community are refugees right now. There are more than 200,000 refugees in Israel right now. And a few weeks later, I found out my mom called the kibbutz paramedic. We have a MADA call. It's recorded. She said that terrorists went by, shot both of them, my dad in the head, her in the face and in her arm. She called for help, but the terrorist already burnt the ambulance and shot the tires, so nobody could get help. And that's all I knew. Then there was a deal finally. After 50 days, they released 100 hostages. Every day they released about 10. And I had to wait every night to get a list from Hamas and was hopeful to see my mom's name in that list and get her back, hug her. Every night I would wait. It would either come at 9 p.m., 5 a.m., we didn't know. Part of this terror is not just murdering my parents, murdering my community. They ruined our mindset. We are under terror, psychological terror, every second of the day. Right now there are 134 hostages. We don't know if they're alive or dead. We don't know anything. After the hostages were released, I knew most of them. None of them saw my mom. I understood that there is a problem here. Where's my mom? I wanted to ask the Canadian government to help me. This is the only Canadian hostage right now. Where's my mom? Every Canadian in the world should know that they're safe. Every Canadian deserves to be buried respectfully. I deserve to bury my parents. I deserve to bury my mom. My children, their grandchildren, deserve to have somewhere to go on Memorial Day. My parents are still held hostage. And after 83 days, we found out that my mom was also brutally murdered. The terrorists came back for her, took both her and my dad into Gaza. And they are still in Gaza, held hostage for no reason other than a card to negotiate I don't know what. More than 6 months have gone by. My friends are still there. Might be pregnant. Maybe being forced to have an abortion. Under what conditions? Inside a cage, in tunnels. Where are they? Nobody knows. All of these hostages right now, Tiferet, who was murdered, Adi, Agam, who you will hear about, they are all people who believed in life. They wanted to celebrate life. You know, people who knew them, all they speak about is the sunshine, is the light that they kept spreading. All they wanted is to do good. And these are the people, humanitarian civilians, who were intentionally, systematically, and synchronized evilness is being continued each and every second. As we stand here, as you're listening to me, right now, they are inside tunnels, in cages, being abused. You heard the testimony of Irene and Zaka. Imagine what they're doing every day now to these hostages. I'm asking the Canadian government to help me get my Canadian mother out of there so I can bury her and help get all of the hostages out. This is a humanitarian issue. This is not politics. It's a humanitarian issue. It's a lot bigger than Jews against Palestinians. This is something a lot bigger, and Canada should focus on helping not only Israel and the Palestinians, but its own country. Yesterday it was in Israel, tomorrow it might be in Canada. And my family, who is in Toronto, my uncle could go one day on a train, and this could happen right there. So we should fight for peace. We all have the same goal for both Palestinians, Jews, and Israelis. There are Muslims hostage right now, Israeli Muslims, in the tunnels. We should fight for everybody. It's not Jews against Palestinians. It's right against wrong. Terror group against innocent civilians. Please help me get my mom out and 134 hostages out and save humanity, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Iris. And I'm going to now ask Ashley Waxman-Bakshi, originally from Hamilton, Ontario, and the cousin of Agam Berger, one of the hostages who are still being held, to please come to the podium.
My name is Ashley Waxman. I was born in Hamilton, grew up in Vaughan. We've heard about the lives that can no longer be saved. But my baby cousin Agam, she's 19 years old and she can be saved. She's a beautiful 19-year-old girl. She plays the violin. She wished for peace with the Palestinians on her 19th birthday. She was taken after she saw the massacre of 16 of her friends right in front of her. They were taken, 6 of them, into Gaza on October 7th. One of them, Noah Marciano, we already know, has been killed in captivity. We know about the sexual abuse on October 7th. At first, the world didn't believe testimony of Jewish women. But finally, the United Nations and independent investigations have confirmed, as well as testimony that we've heard here from Zaka. There was rape, there was sexual abuse on October 7th. That was one day. I want to look in the eyes of every single Canadian and ask, how would you feel if your mother, your daughter, your cousin, your sister, or your best friend was being held by a terrorist organization for 165 days and you knew that she was being psychologically tortured? You knew that there was sexual abuse going on. We know from released hostages that there is rape, and that she could be pregnant, what would you do? There's nothing that we can do. If I could, I would run into Gaza and take her out myself. As a Canadian, I've been embarrassed to see motions passed this week. This is not Canada. These are not Canadian values. We don't stand on the side of terror. We stand with the innocent. We fight for women. We fight for innocent people that were taken hostage. We don't reward terrorism. By passing a motion to not help Israel, to not sell Israel weapons, what message are we sending to terrorism? Not only to Hamas, but to every terrorist organization around the world. You are telling every single Israeli that they don't have a right to defend themselves, that they don't have a right to live. You are telling Agam and all the 134 hostages that they don't have a right to come home. That is the message being sent. And as a Canadian, I am ashamed. Anti-Semitism is not new in Canada. We're talking about the rise of anti-Semitism, but let me tell you what, 20 years ago, on my university campus, at Wilfrid Laurier University, I was called a dirty Jew, and I had pennies thrown at me. This is not new. I was told to go back to where I came from, so I did. I went to Israel, my indigenous homeland, the sovereign state that is supposed to defend me, to keep me safe as a Jew. Well, guess what? Today, I don't feel safe. Not in Israel, not in Canada, not in Paris, not in London, nowhere. Because it feels like the world just doesn't see the difference between a terrorist organization that infiltrated a sovereign state and massacred in the most brutal way, in the most barbaric way, and took innocent people as hostages, that uses its own civilians as human shields, and the difference between the sovereign state, who does everything, including Iron Dome systems and intelligence services, to protect its civilians. I ask you, as a fellow Canadian, to stand with humanity, to rub your eyes and see what is happening right in front of you. If you care to bring these innocent people home, and I believe that most people truly care, international pressure against the state of Israel does not bring them home. Support for Israel, showing terrorists that the world supports free democratic nations, that will bring them home. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ashley, for sharing the story of Agam and of the 134 other hostages who continue to be brutally tortured and assaulted while we meet here today. And to each and every one of you who have come here to share the story of your loved ones, to share your eyewitness testimony, and to call for action, to call for the Canadian government to stand on the right side of history, to stand with these innocent civilians, and to take action against terror. It's important to remember that all the crimes you heard described today were funded, trained, organized, systematically and synchronized, as they said, but not just by Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad terrorist organizations, but by those who control them, which is the Iranian regime and its Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps. As many of you know and have reported on here, they have free reign in Canada. Those who perpetrated and organized the crimes that you heard today and that continue to take place get their money from organizations here in Canada, freely use our banking systems, work with our businesses, and kill Canadians. That should not be allowable. That is unacceptable. Canada must list the Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps as a terrorist organization for these terrorist crimes against Canadians, and which would protect Canada from those crimes happening here as well. The Wallenberg Centre has also submitted to the Canadian government a list of over 60 individuals and entities who are responsible for these crimes that are still ongoing. We know who the perpetrators are, but Canada has not yet sanctioned them. We are calling on the Canadian government to take action, to list the Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps as a terrorist organization, and to impose Magnitsky sanctions against the leaders of Hamas, of PIJ, and of the various businesses, organizations that funnel them money. And I want to single out as well one of those organizations in Canada, Samidoun. They were criminally investigated in Germany, kicked out of Germany for supporting terrorism. They moved to Vancouver. They operate out of Vancouver here in Canada. Direct ties to the PFLP terrorist organization. And now organizing some of the anti-Semitic hate rallies, the crimes against Jews here in Canada. This rise in anti-Semitism, it is part and parcel of the crimes perpetrated on October 7th. The same perpetrators have organizations here in Canada that are organizing hate rallies, that are sending money to support these attacks, and Canada must take action. Thank you again for being here today, for bearing witness. And on va prendre des questions de la presse, s'il y a du temps. On est là pour répondre à vos questions, en anglais ou en français. We'll take any questions that you may have. Thank you.
I guess perhaps this is for Iris. In the immediate aftermath of October 7th, the Canadian government was actively involved in hostage negotiation. They had sent a diplomat, they'd named a person. And I wonder, it's a tricky question, but do you get the sense that the Canadian government has washed its hands of this particular issue and talking to your family and helping to get the hostage negotiators no longer there? We don't hear about activities on the part of the federal government to engage on this file anymore. And what is your sense of that?
You know, the facts are, my mom is still hostage. There are still 134 hostages. So, no, they're not doing enough. I don't feel like they washed their hands. I feel like even if things weren't done before, it's never too late. Canada has a very, very unique voice that, from talking to a lot of PMs, they don't realize how powerful their voice is. And with that motion that passed, that sends a message. It sends a message. It doesn't just affect Canada. It affects the world. It affects the world. It sends a signal that what happened to my mom, what happened to Adi, what happened to Agam, what happened to Tiferet, it's okay. It's okay. And you know what? Let's reward you. So I think that answers the question. You know, the Canada I know doesn't reward terror. It doesn't. But something happened on October 7th. And I think we really should open our eyes and realize what's happening right now.
The way the motion, the passage of that motion, does it diminish Canada's voice as the broker it could have been? Does this motion, you know, pick a side effectively?
I think Canada's been showing they're picking sides, definitely with this motion. And, you know, it's up to us to make sure that we're on the right side of history. This is not, again, it's not about sides. Everybody tells me it's sides. We need to understand both sides. What side of humanitarian side is a side? What side? This is not, again, it's not Gaza against Israel. There are many refugees in Gaza and in Israel. What is the difference? Israel would look exactly like the photos you see in Gaza if the government didn't care, like Hamas doesn't. We have iron domes. We have safe rooms. That's why Israel looks like it is, but we still have 200,000 refugees. My kibbutz They don't know where they're going to live next year. Agam's parents, they don't know where their daughter is. Do you know where your kids sleep at night? They don't. So I think every government, especially the Canadian government, that I know is doing things in the negotiation field, we can do more. And this is not just Israel. I'm here as a Canadian. I am Canadian. My siblings are Canadian. My mother is Canadian. My grandma, who is 95 years old, she's in Toronto right now, mourning her daughter that she can't bury. She is hostage. The fact that she is hostage and dead, what does that tell you? You know, we still have bodies of terrorists in Israel that no one claimed from Gaza. We know exactly who's missing in Gaza, in Israel. We know exactly who the hostages are. We value life. We value life. Does Canada value life, or does it reward murder? That's all I have to say. Thank you. Thank you for your question.
I just wanted to add on that. As a Canadian, to see internal Canadian politics being used, or I should rephrase that, seeing the massacre, the horrific situation that is right now in the Middle East, our lives and our hostages being used for internal Canadian politics. For me as a Canadian, watching the vote and seeing it pass felt like the knife that had been stabbed in my heart on October 7th was being pushed deeper and deeper by my own government. That's exactly what it felt like.
Ashley, you commented on the motion, and I wondered if anyone else, any other Canadians, have any view on it?
I believe you heard Iris and Ashley respond, and I believe they speak for everyone in highlighting that this is a reward for terrorism when you pass a motion, when Canadians are still being held hostage, when Canadians were murdered and maimed, and there's widespread and systematic terrorist atrocities against civilians, sexual violence and rape. When Canada chooses to pass a motion like that, to seek to end arms sales to Israel as it's exercising its lawful right to self-defense under international humanitarian law, Canada is saying that they're endorsing more massacres if Israel cannot defend itself, if it does not have the means to defend itself. As Hamas said, October 7th will happen again and again and again.
Can I just add to that? You know, I stand here, and I am very privileged to have not only Canadian citizenship, but also American citizenship. And the American administration, I don't need to tell you how involved it is, not only with Israel, but with us American families of hostages. We have weekly meetings with them. And I'm just asking, where's the Canadian government? My mom is Canadian. Where are they? Where are they? Am I allowed to bury my mom? Is she allowed to be buried respectfully? And with this motion, it's not only rewarding terror, but it's also telling innocent civilians in Gaza, innocent Palestinians, it's okay. It's okay that you were misplaced. It's okay that there was a tunnel city built underneath your nose, 20 years with donation money. It's okay that you've been a refugee for 20 years. It's okay. It's okay. What kind of message is that? What kind of message is that to the world? What kind of message is by any means necessary? What kind of message is that? Is rape by any means necessary? Is that okay? What are the Canadian values? We should really think. You know, motions are written text, but they have a meaning. They mean something. And I know the Canadian values, and I know that there's a heart in that motion. But it's not enough to put a Band-Aid on a situation. We need to fight the core of it, the oppressors, the terror groups. This is a wider issue, a world issue that we need to fight. And let's not put a Band-Aid on it. Let's be on the right side of history. Let's look back 20 years from now and be proud that Canadian took the lead in this. Save the only Canadian hostage. Save 134 hostages. Save the Palestinians. Let's fix the Middle East issue. We were on the right path with the Abraham Accords, with many other things. You know, in Israel, Arabs and Jews live together, side by side. Many people don't know this. It's not just a Jewish state. 20% of Israel, if I'm not mistaken, is Arabs. Equal rights. They can vote. And as you heard Irene here, you know, we don't care if it's a terrorist and they just murdered my mom. We will still treat the terrorist alive or dead. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Iris. And I see that we're out of time. With that, we will conclude this press conference today with the Canadian families of the victims of October 7th. Jackie Rivers Vital, the grandmother of Negev and Eshel and the mother of Adi, may her memory be for a blessing. Irene Nurit Cohen, volunteer from the Zaka humanitarian organization that was a first responder treating all the bodies and responding to the crime scenes of October 7th and witnessing the rape and the murder. Galit Lapidot, the aunt of Tiferet Lapidot, may her memory be for a blessing. Ashley Waxman Bakshi, the cousin of Agam Berger, who's still being held today and who's calling out for justice, calling out for Canada to do something. And of course, Iris Weinstein-Hagi, whose neighbors, whose friends, whose family from Kibbutz Nir Oz are still being held, and whose Canadian mother is still being held. Merci pour être là aujourd'hui, pour votre témoignage et pour votre action.